And we're live.
Rest in peace to our friend Maddie. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, whatever time it is for you right now. Just know that you are locked in until the point with
Skip
and the King. You guys know what to do. Go down there, click subscribe, click like. Tonight, we are joined by the one and only Robert Misovic, one of the greatest basketball minds, just a general great mind, in my opinion. If you guys have an opinion about that, fight me, okay? Now, the Raptors are on a 5-game win streak, and they're doing great. They went from a losing record to a winning record to becoming the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference, which is no longer in the Eastern Conference. So I have to ask you guys, Robert, would you like to talk? Skip, would you like to talk about this? Are there any weaknesses on this Raptors squad?
Go ahead, Skip.
I think it's easy to look at that big start and get really excited and jump to some conclusions and think this team's ready, this team's there. I think they still have holes. I would say the biggest hole, obviously, has got to be the starting center spot. Precious Achiuwa has really been struggling so far this year. I think it's only a matter of time before he ends up on the bench and Khem Birch is in that starting role. But then that opens up another can of worms, which is the bench rotation. I think there is some depth issues on the bench as well. But overall, I would say the biggest concern right now is whether this team needs a big man, and if they need to, whether they need to go out and acquire one, whether they need to play a lot more OG at the 5 spot, whether they just need to lean on Khem Birch a lot more. But I think if you're looking at one positional spot on the roster, you could also look at playmaking a little bit. I think there might be some holes there, but I don't think the point guard rotation is going to change all that much. I think basically if you're looking for somebody, it's what we've been saying for the past year and a half. You need to find your big man of the future. And I don't know if it's Precious Achiuwa.
Robert?
I think it's hard to get a read on this team without Pascal Siakam, without Yuta Watanabe, because honestly, I don't think Precious is playing many minutes, and I don't think Boucher is playing any minutes at all if those two guys are healthy. And I definitely don't think that OG and Fred are having to play 42 minutes a night if those guys are healthy. So I would like to take a look at this team when they're healthy, because there's a very good case to be made that your starting center, albeit he'll be a little bit small, at 6'8", but he's got a 7'4" wingspan. It might just be Scotty Barnes for this year, but I agree with Skip that if there is a weakness on this team, it's definitely the starting center position. And, playmaking, again, I expect Pascal Siakam to be an upgrade on that front, because he's going to be getting minutes from guys who aren't playmakers right now. And a lot of the guys who are trying to be playmakers right now are probably going to become finishers with Siakam coming back. So I think it settles up a lot of the issues. And I would argue that, if you can just replace Siakam and Watanabe with Boucher and, Precious, you might just be 9-0 right now. So, ain't broke, don't fix it.
I like that. Well, guys, from what I've seen the last 5 games is Goran Dragic has sat out, and the Raptors have won 5 games. We all know the Raptors have a very deep team. They have a really good bench, really good roster. Skip, I hate you because you got mad at me for this the last couple times. Okay? But they do have a very deep team, a lot of potential players, and a lot of valuable assets. So now what I want to ask you guys is, which of those possible assets would you give up for a potential trade to make the Raptors a legit contender in this league and make everybody stand up south of the 52nd parallel?
Robert, I'll let you take that one.
So Goran Dragic is a expiring contract at $20 million, right? Svi has played out of his mind, right? And he's on a proven contract. And I don't know if the Raptors are already thinking about this, but they should be, that he's not opting into that player option next year. And at 24 years old, it's hard to argue that they shouldn't bring him back. I mean, again, it's 9-game sample size. He could probably fall off a cliff tomorrow and go back to being, bench Svi from, a few years ago. But I've watched this guy closely for a while, and I do think that they should factor in into re-signing him next year. And shooters get paid in this league, shooting 40+% from three. He's been one of the most impactful players, not just on the Raptors. He is the most impactful player on the Raptors two-way by a lot of analytics. He's actually one of the most impactful players in the NBA right now, which is crazy to say coming off the bench. Again, 9-game sample size, but I think he's shown a lot. So the only question mark right now is you have these expiring contracts in Chris Boucher, in Goran Dragic, and you're pretty tapped out financially, right? You've got a huge contract commitment to Pascal Siakam. So there's a lot of teams out there who might be looking to move off a big contract. And you might be thinking, I want to, get one of those players on an upgrade to bolster this roster. But then I also wonder if that player that you're getting that might have 2-3 years left on their deal is the player that eventually costs you the ability to re-sign Svi, So that's the trade-off right now. And that's, I think, where the Raptors have to be evaluators and just see what they have in this roster, because they did just sign, Fred VanVleet's on a new contract. OG signed up to big money. Granted, I think he's a discount at what he's making. Gary Trent just signed a new contract. Pascal Siakam, new contract. That's like most of your salary cap on 4 guys, right? So you have some value, right? You have some value. Delano Banton, but he's a second-round pick. He's going to come up for a contract extension really soon too. And I could argue you're probably going to have to pay him $10 million if he keeps playing this way, minimum, right? So there's a lot of youth on this team. And when you have youth that's exceeding expectations, you should start planning out. And you may not be the type of team that wants to commit $35 million to a CJ McCollum or something like that, right? That being said, yes, there are some players that I would like to look at. Skip, if you want to go through maybe what you're seeing in terms of who they could trade for, I'll happily list off some names that the Raptors could be targeting.
Yeah, Skip, what players?
Okay, so this is kind of the question, right? Like you got into the contract situation. So you have the Goran Dragic contract. If you ship out that Goran Dragic contract, you can get a player who's making a medium-sized salary, a big salary, and work that in. But if you're not moving that contract, then, I think they obviously are moving that contract. But if you're looking at other options, it's kind of like either you go and you swap Dragic for someone who's on a big deal, or you're basically scraping the bottom of the barrel in terms of payroll. Like you're getting guys who make $3-4 million a year. Mm-hmm. So obviously, I think this is kind of played out at this point, but I've always sort of had a bit of an eye to the Indianapolis guys, the Indiana guys, I should say, Myles Turner and Domantas Sabonis. I think they're candidates to fill that center spot. Myles Turner, obviously a block machine. I think he'd fit pretty well into the defense. Sabonis, a guy who can move the ball, kind of be a mini Marc Gasol type. But then when you look at a player like that, you look at, okay, yeah, we can ship out Dragic to match the salaries, but what are we adding to make it worth Indiana's while? And honestly, for those two guys, I think you're starting to look at digging into the core four, and I think that's just a non-starter for the Raptors. So those were two names that sort of occurred to me. And then on the other side, you could like scour the league, kind of maybe look at some fringe guys, some prospects that haven't really panned out. I know that in Memphis, Brandon Clark's kind of out of the rotation. I don't know if he's quite a big man who could play the center spot, but maybe he could factor in the rotation somewhere. I don't know, someone like that. But I'm gonna walk this back. Actually, I'm gonna say I don't think it's time for the Raptors to go out and make a move right now. I think as much as this is an issue, the center spot, I think they're playing well as it is. We're gonna have to wait, like you said, until Siakam comes back, until Scottie comes back, until Utah comes back, and we see what they're made of. And then we can kind of just roll with it from there and see if Precious can develop into something, if OG can step up in the 5 spot, where this team stands in January and February, going into the trade deadline. Is this really going to be a team that's a high seed in the East? I mean, we can say, like, based on what we've seen, yeah, they should be a playoff team, but that's not the same thing as being a contender that needs to make a move right now to get better. Like, if you're an 8 seed, just go ahead, be an 8 seed, get the experience, and maybe a year or two out, you make that move. Anyway, I'll leave it there for now.
Robert, do you have any specific players that you think the Raptors can target or acquire?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a list.
Here we go.
Okay, here we go. I want to preface this by saying that there are a lot of guys on this team right now that are value contracts, right? So I didn't think that Gary Trent was going to be a value contract going into this offseason. I thought he was going to be an albatross contract. So far, he's pretty much at 22. Again, I could argue as one of the better two-way wings so far this year, especially on the defensive end. He's earning that contract, and he's 23, I think now. So that's a value contract. OG is a value contract, like heavy value contract. Like he's worth twice what he's making right now.
Pretty much untouchable.
He should be. He should absolutely be untouchable. Fred VanVleet, 18, 19 million. That's a value contract. He's been one of the better starting point guards in the NBA. Svi is a discount bargain basement contract. I can't believe that they got him for what they have him for, but they only have him for a year. I think what we've seen from Kem, as a serviceable backup center at $6 million, I'll argue that's a bargain contract. And Scotty Barnes, just by virtue of being a rookie, that's a value contract if there ever was one, right? And Delano Banton, guys like this, they'll be value contracts just by virtue of the fact that they're rookies, they're second round rookies. So they have gotten a lot of value out of very little money. And I could argue that really right now you have $50 million on your payroll that's not playing, right? In between Pascal and Dragic, right? So those are your big contracts. Yuta Watanabe is also a free agent next offseason. I just want to throw that in there. I didn't include him in the first one, but from what I've seen from Utah in preseason and, in the summer, I'm getting a feeling this might be another guy that you want to bring back for $8-9 million next year. So
hell yeah,
there is a very solid case to be made to just say, okay, hold on to Boucher, hold on to Dragic, work with this core, pray that Precious or someone like that develops, because Precious is also a value contract if he pans out, because he's a rookie on his second year, which means you have him for 2 more years at a very, very low cap hit, right? So players that I would like to target fit into the Precious Achiuwa mold of maybe guys who are out of the rotation, young players who are steals, as opposed to where I felt like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I was like, we need to swing for the hills and trade a core piece to get an upgrade. I feel like the core here might actually work. And what's really not working is that starting center position. So not to wax poetic forever, let's just get to the list. So the biggest name by far on this list is DeAndre Ayton, right? Now, this is probably, I think this might mean that you move off of Siakam eventually. Because I just don't see how the hell you can have Barnes, Siakam, OG, and Pascal together. You could conceivably if you consider Pascal, if you consider Barnes a backcourt player, and he could be a backcourt player. I'm just saying, in terms of contractual fit, in 3 years, that's going to be a lot of money committed to those 3 guys.
Okay, hang on. Let me stop you right there. What do you think the Suns accept from the Raptors for DeAndre Ayton that isn't a core 4 player outside of the core 4?
A good owner.
No.
No, you're absolutely right. It's going to start with 3 first-round picks immediately, probably a pick swap, and probably a young piece that the Suns like, and an expiring contract, and you're probably going to take back because he's still on this rookie contract, so the cap hit isn't very high. So you're going to have to take back a bad contract with him, add picks. It's a huge investment. If they believe in him, this is probably my least favorite of my options. Working down the list, right? And by the way, this all hinges on the fact that if they've started out slow, 3-3 so far, they may not want to pay this guy. Right, they may not see him as max player, and so if they project, and they should be projecting, that someone out there is desperate enough to offer this guy a max contract in the offseason, well, you're going to lose him for nothing, right? Because you have no leverage at that point. You're going to have to match that contract, and then you're going to have to try to trade that contract later. And I'm not saying they're not going to match it; they're definitely going to match it. But if they can extract 3 first-rounders and a young player they like, and get off a bad contract and maybe help the missiles out, I don't know. Maybe they would do it, but this is a stretch.
I also don't know if he really fits the Raptors system, but he's good enough that might not matter. But
so Robert,
he might not.
Who you have on your list?
So the second one is someone who is already rumored to, and he's a Canadian, which is Dwight Powell. I think in this case, because of the money that he makes, he makes about $10-11 million a year for the next few years. I would actually argue that even with the Moses Brown inclusion, and I'm not a huge Moses Brown guy, I realize that some people hype this guy up like he's the next Kareem, but he's okay. I watched him play the other day. He's all right. I would argue that in order to take that contract, I think that the Mavs would probably have to add a pick. I would argue they would have to add a pick to get an expiring for Dwight Powell, because he really,
and we all know what expiring bet is.
Yeah. So that's sort of the second way to go. The third way to go.
I like that one because Goran Dragic would like to go to Dallas and join Luka. Yeah, and we could bring home one of our boys, one of our Canadian boys.
I think that trade almost happened in the offseason. I think they just couldn't agree on the picks.
Right, exactly. And
so who else do you got, brother?
So these are two of the more like in the Precious Achiuwa mold. Is Jackson Hayes from the New Orleans Pelicans. He's 21 years old, right? He's a big-time shot blocker and athlete. He was a good rim runner. He's a solid potential play, right? He's not undersized. He is weak. I just sometimes we just convinced Gary Trent to go from probably the worst starting shooting guard defender to the best in a single offseason. So I don't want to doubt what this coaching staff can do to young players who are willing to buy in. So I don't know Jackson Hayes personally. I don't know anyone who knows him personally. So I don't know what his mental makake is, but I do know.
That's a surprise. You know a lot of people.
I do, but I don't know anyone in New Orleans. So I don't know what his commitment is to getting better. But if he's committed to getting better, this would be a great system for him to thrive under. And it would be, it would be an interesting thing to see what the Raptors development could do with him. And the other player, who will be a restricted free agent this offseason is Mo Bamba. And, again, 7'10" wingspan kind of fits what the Raptors do. I don't know what the Magic would want for him. I think they might be showcasing him for a trade, to be honest, by starting him. He hasn't looked bad, and his numbers have always suggested that he should play more. But for whatever reason, he hasn't played more. And, I've talked to some Magic fans who think that there's some sort of conspiracy that they just want to sign him up after his rookie deal to a kind of lower contract and then let him go to unleash him a little bit. But he's not great. But again, it's Orlando. Not a lot of players develop well in Orlando, as we're seeing with Jalen Suggs, as we've seen with a lot of other young players. So I think that he could be good. Now, the big player that I would absolutely 1000% target, and
this is what I wanted to ask you. I think I know where you're going with this one.
Yeah, and it's
because you've been a pretty big advocate of this one. Tell me if I'm wrong. Ben Simmons joining the positionless Raptors.
No.
Who could play anywhere from 1 to 5? No. I saw your comments on that one. So then who is it?
I have since soured on the Ben Simmons train, and I think everyone but his parents probably should sour on him at this point. But I am really big on this Jakob Poeltl. I will argue, based on the stats, based on the analytics, that Jakob Poeltl is probably one of the most top 5 underrated players in the NBA. Not hyperbolizing, he's really good. He's just unfortunately playing a really stinky team in San Antonio. So I think I think he's a solid passer. He's a really smart player, great defensive IQ, really good rebounder, adequate shot blocker, good contesting at the rim, good rim runner, solid set. He's a solid pick setter. That's one thing that you're seeing with Khem Birch. When he's in that lineup, Fred VanVleet just has an extra foot of space every time he rolls off that pick because Khem is just a slightly bigger body, and Jakob is basically a better, bigger version of Khem 3 years younger. And I think that that's the type of player you want. And he's on a 2-year contract. He's got 2 years left on his 3-year contract that he signed at $18 million. I think that's a huge value deal. And I know that we gave up on him, but the Spurs are rebuilding.
I mean, Kawhi, come on, it was Kawhi. We didn't give up on him. That's not fair.
Well, I mean,
who would you give up for him?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Honestly, I would give up 2 firsts to get him. And I know that people think I'm crazy.
What about any current players?
But I could argue that if you get him, those firsts are going to be basically seconds. Like you'll be
yeah.
the top.
Yeah, I could get behind that trade. I think I actually like that concept because he wouldn't be a big point getter. He wouldn't be a big he wouldn't demand the ball a lot. And we've already seen how he fits into this offense previously, into this defense.
Yeah. And he's come a long way.
Slot in. Yeah.
He's come a long way since his Raptor days. I don't think he got necessarily the longest leash here, but he's developed a lot in San Antonio. It would be a bit of a homecoming for him as well. I think for us, again, it just fits what we do so well. He's adequate at coming out and guarding perimeter players. He's not Precious Achiuwa quick, but he makes up for a lot of that with just how intelligent he is as a player. So in terms of like, what would I give up? Chris Boucher and, I don't know, a pick first swap rounders. And a pick. Yeah. And, maybe even giving up next year's first rounder, because right now, I could argue that a lot of people probably think that Raptors pick is going to be either a mid first rounder or a late lottery pick. And, if they continue to play at the pace that they're playing and Siakam comes back and you get someone like Jakob Poeltl or someone like that, you could argue that pick might be in the late 20s.
Late first round.
I think I'd wait a couple months before I move the pick. But I understand what you're saying. It has more value now, but I'd rather know what you're giving. Look at
the young players on this team, right? You got Banton, you got David Johnson, who I'm still high on. I'm still high on David Johnson. I like Justin Champagnie. Love Scotty Barnes. We got OG Anunoby at 24, Gary Trent at 22, Svi Mihajlovic at 24, Precious Achiuwa at 23. How many rookies do you want to bring into this team next year and the next year? Because honestly, I would argue that the Raptors are pretty adept at finding value in the second round. I mean, they found a lottery talent, in my opinion, in Delano Banton in the second round. So I don't think that you need necessarily, or nor do you have the space, frankly, to add another mid-first rounder next year. And that player is just going to toil at the end of the bench, because who the hell are they going to play over? They're going to play over Siakam and OG. They're going to play over Banton. So these guys are just going to keep getting better. I think you're at a slightly different place than you were 2 years ago. I'm really impressed with how fast the Raptors rebuilt from this, because, I mean, basically we went from, okay, Lowry's leaving, Giannis signed with Milwaukee. What the hell are we doing? To suddenly we have a treasure chest of young players who have huge value. And, it's just, we went bargain hunting. It's like going to a flea market and finding gold, like we really do a great job of this. And I just really like the core fit together with Barnes, with Fred, with Pascal, OG, etc. And the fact that these guys are all locked up for the foreseeable future, you're not really worrying about your core. Those four guys are your core. And Gary Trent, if you could include him as part of your core, I mean, those five guys can start together. The
reason I like the Poeltl thing is because I don't think it disrupts anything. It doesn't disrupt anything important on the team right now.
It disrupts the opposing team.
You're not shipping out a core piece, and you're getting someone in theory who could actually slot into the starting lineup or the bench unit and really help them out. So I do like that deal. But
yeah, and I think like we alluded to this earlier in the pregame when we were talking about it. And I think maybe your viewers would really like to hear about it, because the one thing in the Raptors defense, if you're a Raptor fan, you've been watching the Raptors play, what you're noticing is ball pressure resulting in turnovers off the pass, right? So you're having a guy like, let's just take a common possession. So a guy like Julius Randle gets the ball in the post against OG Anunoby. Suddenly you have Fred VanVleet trying to dig into the ball a little bit. Julius Randle gets trapped. The passing lane gets blocked. He throws a pass. Gary Trent swipes the pass, and off the Raptors go the other way, right? That's been a hallmark possession for the Raptors defense this season, and it's working really well. So basically in that case, I would
say for 5 years it's been like that.
It's just worked so much better this year, and it's been more pronounced this year because the guys are younger. I don't necessarily think Kawhi, et cetera. Like I agree. I agree that has been somewhat of the defensive philosophy. I will argue that if you add a guy like Poeltl, who is a better rim protector and a better shot blocker than currently pretty much anyone on this team other than Boucher, and just Boucher is a lot of wild blocks. Like Poeltl is serious rim contests. I would argue that you now have two ways that your defense can go, right? Either you can cause the turnover off the pass, or you can force the contested shot at the rim and then get the block or the flailing. Because I think an air ball is just as good as anything else, right? Forcing an air ball deflates the offense. So I would argue that, the places where the Raptors have gotten in trouble this year is when that pressure either has been not working, someone's gapped it, or, one person, usually it's Precious Achiuwa, has gotten lost in the rotation and it just hasn't worked, or that pressure hasn't come soon enough, and then the guy's right in the front of the rim. And basically in the playoffs, when, it's a 7-game series, there might be teams like Philadelphia, like Chicago, that have really big guys, in the center spot, who, if they game plan for it properly and they're properly coaching it, they can exploit the lack of size in the center spot. And if Khem Birch is your first, last, and only line of defense, I think that significantly stops your upside. And I think that
thank you for bringing it back to the first question about weakness.
Yeah. And I think that really just, it puts a lot of pressure on guys like OG Anunoby, who are being asked to do so much offensively, to then bang with, Joel Embiid on the other side, or a rookie like Scotty Barnes, who's 20 years old. And yes, he's a big dude, and he's very strong, he's very long, but I don't necessarily want to throw this guy to the wolves and have him guard, grown men in the post.
He's not NBA center strong.
I would argue he's NBA power forward strong. This guy's strong as hell. But yeah, no.
Okay, so
it's about can he do overs? Yeah, go ahead.
Before we get out of here, guys, we're limited on time right now. Before we get out of here, I just wanted to run one thing really quick. Just give me a hot sentence on this one. Okay, the Raptors traded a couple years ago Gervais out. They got Norman Powell. They got a first-round pick, which turned out to be OG Anunoby. So do you think the Raptors might want to offload one of the contracts that they have now for a future pick to turn it into something great?
There isn't really a deal like that out there. I mean, the contract they have to get rid of is Dragic, but you need to get salary back to make that deal work, and you're not getting any value back for him. So I don't think...
Maybe a pick. I'm talking about getting a pick. Robert?
I don't think you even get a pick for him.
Again, this is sort of the trade-off that we talked about, right? So if you are trading him for an expiring for expiring, I could see you just getting that player back. So maybe a player who fits the center spot, et cetera. You know what I mean? But the trade-off here is the only way you get a pick in that trade is if you take salary back past this year.
Future salary. Yeah.
Right. So
I was just asking about unloading a contract or unloading a player for a future
we don't really have a contract to unload unless that contract is Pascal Siakam. So if Pascal Siakam comes back, and it's not really. I have a lot of faith that he's going to be really good this year. I just
Same here.
It's just a feeling that I have watching him on the sidelines, just being so energized. But if he comes back and for whatever reason he's kind of mild P from the past 2 years, right? It just doesn't fit.
Don't tell Andrew's wife that.
It's sort of a no-win situation, because if he looks great, I mean, good for you. You have a max player who's playing like a max player. If he looks bad, his trade value is probably in the tanker. But that's the one contract that you could potentially unload and just get yourself off a player. And I don't think that, as good as he's going to be, he's ever going to completely earn that contract. I'm just being straight up. Like if he returns back to his 22, 23 points per game on efficient, shooting, I still don't think he's a max player. I think he's just below that. So he'll always be a little bit overpaid. They paid for upside. They didn't get what they bought, what they really bargained for with him. Because when they gave him that contract, he was coming off the championship year, right? And they were expecting him to get a lot better over the next 2-3 years, and he really hasn't. So even if he goes back to what he showed right after that, I would argue probably they were expecting a little bit more. But if he fits, he fits. And again, the Dragic contract, you move off of it, that's an expiring that you're giving up. But if you're not getting expiring back, then that might seriously hamper your ability to sign some young players next year. Your own young players like Svi and, guys like Banton, guys like that. They're Utah, Watanabe. These guys are all going to come up, and they're not going to be cheap, right? Because if you're a good team, as you realize, if you're a good team, your players are priced a little bit more valuably around the league. And, it always works that way.
All right. Thank you for your input, Robert. It's always a pleasure having you on the show, man. These people, okay, you guys online. I just gotta say this before we close out.
The hate parade.
The haterade. What are y'all drinking? Y'all watch Space Jam 2 while listening to Drake? Like, come on, man. Robert has a great mind when it comes to basketball. He knows this stuff. He's been around. He knows how to play. You guys don't even know about this guy. Okay? So you guys keep your comments to yourself. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, which is what happens on social media and online. We all are. We live in a world of free speech. We live in a free democracy.
I don't know what you're talking about. Post your comments down below. We want to see them.
I agree. Comment on this video. If you hate me, put that comment below. That's totally cool.
Oh, this is going to be fun in the morning. Okay. Robert, thank you again for coming on. Robert Misovic. If you guys ever want to find him, in his words, Google me. Go to Pensare Films. Oh, my goodness. That one that you posted yesterday, it was so good about Cade Cunningham. We can get into that, but you guys go look that up on YouTube. You guys know where to find Simon. SimonBroder.com, on Amazon.ca. Buy the book at Dougie J's. Baseball season's over. He's a little lonely. He might want some comfort. So, maybe give him a hug or something. I don't know. You guys.
I'm all basketball these days.
Yeah, it's all about ball. You guys go down there, click subscribe, click like. Let us know what you think. Like these two just said, leave the comments. And whatever you guys got to say, we will respond back to you. We appreciate your opinion. Hopefully you guys appreciate ours. And on behalf of the three of us, Robert, Simon, and myself, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good night, and
peace.
Peace.